Now, we're going to go straight to the comment lines today because this man was very much hot in the news late last week. And I know he has come out and said that, look, the timing of what he said was absolutely bad in the context of a state funeral for a member of An Garda Síochána who was murdered on duty. But he was on the Vincent Browne programme last week and made some very startling comments, surprising comments, some people would argue, that he believed that the Garda Síochána was a corrupt force. And it has evoked an awful lot of reaction here on the radio programme. And Ming Flanagan is the man we're talking about. He joins me on the line now. Luke, good morning.
Good morning to you, Tommy. You might have to put up with announcements yet again from Aaron Rodarin, but
that's okay. All right, thanks for joining us. First of all, you've admitted the timing of all of what you said last week on the Vincent Browne show was bad. I mean, so it wasn't premeditated. What you had said in relation to the Garda force, you would have said anyway. But was it that you just didn't think about the death of the Garda in the context of what you were saying when you said it?
Well, no, I suppose it was in the context of the conversation that was going on. Vincent Browne used the word cynical when he described the exposure, the fact that Claire Daly was under investigation for drink driving. And basically, I took the lead from that, but it's quite obvious that the timing was wrong. And to suggest that I would say all members of the Gardai Síochána are corrupt would be ridiculous, because I know from experience before the show, and now even more so after the show, that many members of the Garda Síochána have contacted me and told me that they actually support my drive to get corruption out of the Garda Síochána. And actually, since that show, 26 members or former members of the Garda Síochána have contacted me, including the Garda whistleblower who is trying to expose the fact that tens of thousands of penalty points have been expunged for important people. But that doesn't change the fact that my timing was wrong. But look, I have said that, but still the issue of corruption, whether it be in the Gardaí, whether it be in politics or in any aspect of life, as far as I'm concerned, it is my duty to root it out.
Yeah, because a lot of people were making the point that it was a little bit ironic, a bit like the pot calling the kettle black, because some people were saying you work in Dáil Éireann, which is probably one of the most corrupt buildings in the whole of Ireland. That's the views of some of our listeners.
Well, Tommy, I wouldn't disagree with you, but I find it interesting that you can say that without me coming back saying, are you saying all politicians are corrupt? Because I wouldn't interpret what you said as that. And it would be unfair. And I actually believe there is corruption in Dáil Éireann, but no one has now accused me of saying all TDs are corrupt. I'm not. But to point out that there is corruption in an organisation doesn't mean you're saying everything is corrupt. But in political life and in the life of being a member of the Garda Síochána, if one is corrupt, then one has a bigger impact on someone's life than, let's say, if you're corrupt, if you were a postman or whatever. But there is corruption in all aspects of Irish life. And I have to say, since I made the comment, I'm actually starting to wonder whether I'll have to open a new office to specifically deal with Garda corruption and to deal with other types of corruption. But look at what greater honour could you pay to a man who died serving the state than to actually root out corruption, because it would be the greatest honour to someone like that.
I suppose in some ways, though, you do take a risk, don't you, of coming out and making statements like you made on Vincent Browne, that, you know, it takes a bit of bravery, some people would argue, to do it.
Yeah, and I suppose some people might say there's a very thin line between bravery and stupidity, and some people might say to me, why didn't I say it up until now? And I have to tell you the truth as to why, because I was scared to tackle this issue until now. And maybe I got a little bit too cosy in my political life. But I suppose now that I have stumbled into it, and stumbled is the word, and I'm not trying to delude anyone here. Now that I am dealing with this issue, I intend to deal with it until I get as much of it solved as is possible.
Do you fear some kind of repercussion, if that's the right word to use, from the force because of what you said?
Well, look, many people have suggested to me that I would now want to watch my back. But the fact that people can actually say that suggests that there is some corruption in the Gardai in the first place. Because really, why should I have to watch my back any more than I ever did? Am I breaking any new laws? Or is it a case that now that I have spoken about Garda corruption, that people will make a greater attempt to find me breaking a law? Really, whether you talk about corruption in the Gardai or not, you should be treated equally by the guards. And I trust them to do that. There are bad eggs within the Gardai, but that doesn't mean they're all bad. But I believe it's my job to root out the bad eggs.
Yeah, but the problem is that even...
The problem, Tommy.
Yeah.
And that problem is, I believe that the complaints procedure that is in place is not tight enough. And I have had many people come to me about this, as I've said before the Vincent Browne show and since it. And I have to say, all I felt was a sense of frustration up until the last week on issues like this, because I thought to myself, sure, what can I do about it? How can I change this? But since then, I have had a good look at the way that the Garda Ombudsman Commission works. And it is quite clear to me that there is a flaw in a system whereby the head of the Garda Síochána can decide whether a complaint is taken seriously or not. And that is no criticism of any individual commissioner or anything like that. It is merely a case of perception. And the obvious perception is that if the head of the Garda Síochána can decide whether someone is going to investigate a guard or not, that is going to cause a problem and does bring people into disrepute, unfortunately, and does make the Gardaí's job harder. Because if what I suggest is done and we tighten up the Garda Ombudsman Commission, then that brings all Gardaí above suspicion, and no one can say that there isn't justice out there.
It's interesting you mentioned the word perception. My final point to you would be that there are many, as you will agree, fine Gardaí out on duty this very morning in cold and wintry conditions doing what it is they do. But the problem is that, perception again might be that we have this tendency in this country that when we have a suggestion of corruption, that everybody is tarred with the one brush, and therefore the fine Gardaí that are out on the streets today might be getting sort of the after effects of the boot you've given to the Gardaí up the backside on the Vincent Browne show in their faces this morning.
Well, I hope they're not, and anyone who's listening to this show, I'd send out the message that you should respect the Garda Síochána, and at the end of the day, they are protecting your house and protecting your children. But as many of the Garda Síochána who have rang me have said, that if I succeed in my goal, then their job will be easier, because no young fella will be able to say to them, sure, you're corrupt. He'll be able to say it straight back to them, well, actually, we're not. We have a really good complaints procedure and we have a good record. And because of that, not only should you trust me, but if you have information on a crime, you should be able to give it to me, because people and the Gardaí need to be able to cooperate with each other for proper investigation of crime to go on. And that is something that needs to happen. But look, it would be, I'd say it again, it would be wrong to say just because there is corruption in politics that all politicians are corrupt. And it would be wrong just because there is corruption in the Garda Síochána to say that all Gardaí are corrupt. In fact, it would be ridiculous. And I have had any amount of what I would describe as patriots contact me in the last week. But the one thing that would worry me is that the main emotion that they expressed when they spoke to me was fear. And fear from the consequences of talking about corruption within the Gardaí. And no one should be afraid to talk about corruption, because remember, 20, 30 years ago. There's a Magdalene Laundries report out this week. Remember, no one believed that when people said it at first. There was horror and there was shock. And people said it's not fair to generalise. I agree it's not fair to generalise. But there's one thing for sure, Tommy. It is certainly not fair quiet about something that you believe is wrong.
Okay. As I can imagine, and as you can imagine, there's loads and loads of texts coming in, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's a few interesting ones. This one from Madeline says, who does the Ming think he is? Wyatt Earp. His job is not to weed out police corruption. Ask him if he ever heard of Serpico. Did you ever hear of Serpico? Okay, he's on a train. That's the problem here. So I think we may have lost Luke there. Luke, can you hear me?
Tommy, I lost you there. I can hear you clearly again. Okay. No, I didn't hear the comment.
Okay, the comment was, who does the Luke Ming think he is? Wyatt Earp. His job is not to weed out police corruption. Ask him if he ever heard of Serpico.
I have heard of Serpico, actually. A friend of mine suggested that I watch it again because it should be very active at the moment. But look at to say that it isn't the job of a politician to root out corruption, well, really, that kind of astonishes me, because if politicians did root out corruption in the last few years, we wouldn't have the bank debt that we do now.
Today. Okay.
And our schools would be doing a lot better.
All right, listen, we'll leave it there. Luke Flanagan, thanks as always for joining us on the train. Not at all. Take care. Sorry about the quality at the end there, but I think we got the general gist of what Luke Ming Flanagan had to say.